what's yours? What is it? What's yours?
Oh, I really love that we have teen prophets now. Like the church has their own podcast.
Yeah.
It's just like also the way Sunil does it, like even taking it a little bit from a different view, like going more into the symbolism and maybe also more for people who like to study things.
Yeah.
Really.
Basically, you being clever people.
Yeah. But it also,
Very few of them are in this room right now. Yeah. I'm speaking for myself. Where did you get offended?
Think a bit more about it yourself.
Yeah.
See it from a different point.
Brilliant.
Apologetics.
Apologetic.
Yeah.
Keep it up.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, keep going, Sunil. And we can show probably a few clips from the podcast. But what is great as well is this we can have a one-dimensional way of running church, which is like we do this is one way to reach people and that's it. But when the body functions, then someone like a Sunil can come along and say, look, actually I've got a different kind of gift. I can share in a certain way and I can talk like this. And in doing so, that can maybe reach people that other people can't reach with the way that they do things. And that's what we're starting to see with the body, is that actually people are starting to say, I think I can do something that God's been putting in me. We're giving people a chance like Sunil, and then that's affecting people that maybe wouldn't have got reached or affected, and that's what's really cool about it. So yeah, love it. So yeah, here's some clips from the TM Proverbs.
Just over 2 years ago, I was in a conversation, so it was in the middle of the broad daylight. It wasn't like a dream or anything like that, but it was like God just suddenly just shone this light on me, like as though he sees everything about me. And at the same time, he doesn't condemn that, but he exposed that, and he embraced me. It was a remarkable thing, because normally when we're picking holes at each other, we're actually making the other person feel guilty, and we're trying to make them feel worse than they are, if you know what I mean. And therefore we get defensive, isn't it? And you naturally do that. But actually in this place, there was no desire for defense, because although it's like God just exposed me, at the same time there was a sense of him embracing me. In other words, nothing I had done, or even like you say, even the thoughts or even the intentions that I had had, which were exposed, were a shock to him. It's like he knew all this, and in fact he gave the real sense that he could expose more if he wanted to, but it came with an embrace. And I found for me what that happened, what the impact it had for me, I don't know if you want to call it psychologically or whatever, was that it gave me the courage to, almost for one of the first times in my life, be willing to look at myself critically, because I already knew I was accepted. You know what I mean? So we get defensive because we think, what happens if they pick holes in us? But actually, once you know you're embraced or accepted, from that place, it's a secure place, and from there you can actually say, oh yeah, I can see that about myself. I can actually see that. Because there's no longer this fear that I'm going to be rejected in seeing it, but rather that actually God's already seen it, and I'm only just seeing it now.
One of the things, because I used to watch religious debates, whereas an atheist against a religious person, and often the religious person would make this point, and I would get annoyed because I didn't understand the critique. I thought they were saying atheists are bad people, and they have no morality, and all of these sorts of things. And I was looking around the world and I was like, wait, I see atheists do good things. That can't be true. But the critique isn't that atheists are bad. The critique is that the good that atheists do has no foundation in their philosophy. It's not that they don't do good. It's just they can't explicate the reasons for why they do good. They can't lay it out. It's just they act in ways they can't fully articulate. And part of the religious critique was that eventually this will run out, this will fragment, this will splinter. Without God in the picture, things will get chaotic. And when they said that, I didn't believe it. But I think one of the things is Peterson was pointing out not just here's the argument. He was saying, look at the world, look at how it's actually going. And I realized, oh yeah, I actually see examples like those predictions that the religious people made were actually kind of playing itself out in front of my eyes. And I guess that's one of the big things with an argument. You can make an argument where you say, oh, if you get rid of religion, this and this and this will happen. But it's quite powerful when you can actually show real life examples. Look, here it's happening.
And this is where I also disagree with
concept of the multiverse from a philosophical point of view is, I don't think it makes sense to talk about other universes where there are other laws of physics, because time and space are a feature of this universe. That's what science itself even says. It says that time and space began in the Big Bang, the singularity, the point of creation. And it's interesting because the Big Bang was actually a theory created by a Christian, by Lemaitre, and it was rejected by mainstream science.
Yeah, they were
for a
really
long
reluctant,
time.
weren't they? Because of its Judeo-Christian implications.
Yes, because it's a singularity. It's a finite point of creation where time and space exist. So talking about anything outside of time and space, talking about variation, doesn't make sense. Because chance can only operate in time and space. To roll a dice, you have to have space to roll it and time for different outcomes to occur, right? And that works in the universe, but it doesn't work outside the universe. So talking about other universes doesn't make sense to me.
Have you heard the pool objection? The pool analogy?
I don't think so, no.
So one of the objections to this is, or is not necessarily to this, but this sort of thinking is, it's by Douglas Adams. He says, he talks about a pool, like a little puddle of water, and it finds itself perfectly situated in this hollow that it's in. And it looks around and it's like, wow, isn't it amazing that this hollow perfectly fits my body shape? But obviously from an outside perspective, you can see, no, it's more the pool has adapted its shape to the surroundings, which is one of the objections to this. But I think Roger Penrose actually had an objection to this, who himself isn't even a Christian, but he said that the problem with this is if we just thought, the reason we see this order is because we happen to be the sort of life that's adapted for this. The problem is we should see a way smaller universe, because we could exist in a universe that's the size of the solar system, and that's way more probable than the universe as we see it, because the bigger the universe gets, the more ordered complexity we have to account for. Yes. So it's not that we fit perfectly into this hollow, it's more we fit into a bit of it, and the rest of it is ordered and complex in a way that isn't explained just by us adapting to it.
We were doing this at Bible study actually on Wednesday, and Sue said something that really blew my mind, that in John 17, Jesus was praying to the Father about himself, saying that, you've glorified me and now I want to glorify you by doing what you've told me to do. And that actually giving God glory means doing what he said. It's and that was big for me, because I was always quite timid and like you said, scared of that potential, and because I didn't want to fail. And that's what I had in my mind, but not realizing that if I don't do what he wants me to do, I've actually not given him the glory and almost put the focus on myself as opposed to the plan. Because the plan is always greater than the foot soldier.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think the analogy you had earlier was with the diamond.
Oh, yeah.
That was really cool. Do you want to
Yeah.
explain
So
that?
I've been thinking about this picture for a while, the multifaceted diamond. You can Google that. It's got like a lot of faces of it. It's not one of the one at the top is usually bigger, but generally the idea is that every facet of that diamond is reflecting the light of the diamond, and that when it's put together, it creates a bigger light, but that each face is important in reflecting that, and that's what we're like. When we're reflecting God in some way, every person is a face of that diamond, and that if you're not doing your part, there's a gap missing there, that is actually important.
At first, I started to believe in God when I was kind of on this journey, and I thought I was a Christian. But I think now looking back on it, I just realized that God exists. And I think when you just realize God exists and you just have this ideal and this thing which judges you, in the face of which you seem so low, it isn't quite as embracing. But I think one of the things that really changed me with that was I heard a sermon where the pastor was talking about when Jesus he says to Judas that he's going to betray him. And Judas is about to leave. And Jesus says, no, stay and eat. even though Jesus has just said he's going to betray him.
Yeah.
And then I remember literally thinking to myself, okay, if Judas can stay, then I can stay.
Wow.
And I think that's the moment where it became like more embracing, and it was like, oh, okay, like you're supposed to come, broken as you are, however you are.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that was a real shift for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, it happened more in 2 steps. This kind of thing.
See, it's interesting because you mentioned Jesus. I mean, when Jesus quite often had to assure people that he wasn't there to judge them, but he was there to save them.
Yeah.
But he said a really interesting thing in I think John 3:17. So John 3:16 is probably the most famous verse in the Bible. For God so loved the world that he sent his only Son, that whoever believes in him will not perish, will not lose on life, but will actually gain eternal life. So that's John 3:16. The very next verse it says, "For those who do not believe in him stand condemned already." So this is something that took me a long time to realize, but I think it's not far away from what we're talking about, which is that when Jesus came to earth, despite the fact that he was not only perfect, but his teaching was profound, his ability to speak with authority was unparalleled. And yet, and therefore people would have thought, he would have made them feel worse than any other human being, because this is finally you're in the face of perfection. Yeah. But actually, what he revealed was that he was coming to save people, and that it wasn't a case like we're in neutral ground, and you might choose Jesus or you might choose another one. Actually, what Jesus reveals is that outside of him, one is already in a state of what you could call condemnation or even death, which is incredibly radical words. So whereas, you think of it like a religious teacher or guru, kind of somebody who teaches and kind of persuades you to follow them, Jesus was essentially saying, actually, I'm not coming to judge you because already you are in a place of condemnation. In other words, I don't need to judge you to make you feel worse. Yeah. And that was my experience 2 years ago. When God's light kind of exposed me, it wasn't that light that made me bad. I already was that way. The light simply revealed it. But like I said, embraced me at the same time. And so Jesus invited, sometimes the worst of people to follow him. And this was offensive to people who were religious and who had spent most of their lives trying to polish their lives and come across super good, was because of Jesus was just embracing people who were so-called failures, who had actually fallen through the cracks in society. So you'd talked about an ideal. Well, some people had kind of fallen through these ideals, and society condemned them, and they probably condemned themselves. And somehow Jesus embraced them. And the question is how? Why? And I think the answer is because Jesus said, do you know what? If you don't know me in a life-giving way, you're already in that place. And all I do is reveal and expose the fact that you're in that place. But I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to actually turn things around.
We were talking about this before we set up. There's one of the things that answers a lot of questions for the Christian that we thought it would be good to shed light on, because if people knew about this theory, it just makes sense of a lot from the Christian perspective.
Absolutely.
And it's called the privation theory of evil, which basically says that evil doesn't have the same sort of existence as good does. It has less of an existence, and what evil is essentially is just the good perverted.
Yes.
So there's nothing which can't be redeemed, or which doesn't have a good way of manifesting itself. It's in rebellion to God, in rebellion to the good, and therefore we see it as evil. And I think if you read John 1, it's just such a simple line. Which for
not
John
simple.
is
Simple but not simple.
All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. And it's just such a simple thing. It's just saying God created everything through Jesus. But the implications are massive, because this means everything in us was made by him. So even though we know the flesh is fallen, it has a way to be redeemed. So one of the things you can do is rather than just saying, okay, this is bad, you think, okay, it might have to die. I might have to completely give it up 100%. But there's some way Jesus can give it back to you fixed or restored.
Absolutely. And I actually think that it makes perfect sense. Because I was saying to you that I've always had that question where I'm saying, well, everyone says that God is good. There's no evil in him whatsoever. And yet he created all things. How is this? And yet we know that there is evil. Like nobody can doubt that. You just have to turn the TV on. And so I was like, what's going on here? So actually, I only just found out about this theory when we were talking about it, that it's just the ability of mankind, the fallen mankind, to twist everything good as soon as it's taken out of its proper context.
And I think it's a way to not give the enemy too much credit, the devil too much credit.
Yes, absolutely.
In the Christian philosophical framework, he can't create anything, and he hasn't created anything.
Well,
in a way, there's nothing
created.
of the devil.
Yeah.
He just turns things upside down, essentially. Turns them against their proper nature or their proper good that they were made for.
And then it makes God actually look even better when he redeems it, because, that's, I absolutely love stories where people come out and say, I was doing ABC, and then 10 years down the line, they're walking with Jesus and they're doing almost something similar, but kind of like Paul, right? That he was so zealous about killing Christians because he believed he was doing God's work. And he did it with all his heart, right? Bless him. And then God works on him, and now he is dying for the faith, and he's going through so much hardship that the same sort of personality that he had to throw all of himself into something, and the mind that he had, I mean, he's just incredible mind, that God used that. I think for me, one of the things that you said even earlier today that's really helped me is about knowing that even the little things about you are important, that they're there for a reason. Maybe you just misunderstood them and used them the wrong way, or maybe other people told you what something that isn't actually what God made it to be, right? And you don't throw anything away until you know what I mean? Well, I don't know if it's throwing away, maybe laying it down until you know what it's for.
Because I guess the danger with what we're saying is that someone can say, oh, therefore everything in me is good.
Right,
so
exactly.
I might not have to let that thing down completely because there's a good way of it, and that's not what we're saying, because sometimes you have to truly let something die, and you have to give it up completely because you can't fix it, you can't find the way to put it in, so you just have to let it die and let God fix it.
I remember Ravi spotted tickets for his a lecture he was giving in London, and we managed to jump on those tickets immediately, and we all went together to London. That was a really interesting experience for me, because I just thought he was an intellectual, there would just be a few geeks there. And when we turned up, it had the atmosphere of like a rock concert. I'd never expected that. I don't know how did it feel for you when you went?
I guess I came already, I already expected the atmosphere to be like that, because in the kind of Jordan Peterson crowd, there was this feeling of something bigger going on. So it almost felt, I guess it almost felt like going to a rock concert, just going there in the first place. I remember just even being excited when he was going to come out. But I guess part of the excitement was he has this heroic quality in terms of fighting the fight that no one else seems to be fighting. So there were all these battles, free speech battles, and just kind of craziness going on college campuses and stuff. And it just felt like there was no other powerful voice, or there were other voices, but it just felt like he stood out among all of what was going on. But not only that, he had eyes to see something that no one else did. He always could get to the root of what was the root of all of this craziness. I guess as just someone who was negatively affected by a lot of the way the culture is, he became a kind of champion to people like me, I guess.
Yeah, it's very interesting. From my perspective, when I went to the talk, I mean, there were celebrities there. It was definitely a whole variation of people, from old to young. he's often criticised as have mostly appealing to men, but it was definitely about 50-50, I'd have said about, and loads of students. And the thing that really struck me was in the question time, because he was talking about Genesis, and he was talking about Adam and Eve, and he was talking about the apple and the important symbolism of those. And one of the questions must have been on sex before marriage and casual sex, and he did the biggest defense of the traditional monogamous marriage that I've ever heard from anyone. And there was huge applause like I'd never heard, and I was just baffled, because I'd been, like, when I was a student, we used to hear like preachers talking about this subject, and we'd be like quiet and nervous. But it was like everybody was so hungry to hear this message. I was like, what is going on? My friend Henry was a Christian. We just looked at each other confused.
Yeah.
And I was also watching Ravi, like clapping like crazy. Like, what, really? So yeah, it stunned me. It felt like there was a massive hunger for the sort of message that he was telling, and it really woke me up, frankly.
I think it speaks to this kind of idea of, like, when people hear a lot of the biblical rules, they can just think, oh, these rules are kind of arbitrary rules of a kind of tyrant who just wants to impose things on you for no reason. But I think when you actually try to live this kind of ruleless life and you actually experience the chaos, you realize, actually, no, though these rules can be very difficult, ultimately they're here to help us, not just to dominate over us. The heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of his hands, which is obviously true from a Christian perspective. In an intuitive sense, you just look at the sky, you see its glory, and it's just the awe of that seems to create in us this sensation of this is created. But I guess the more you zoom in, the more you use telescopes, the more equations you introduce, the more this becomes apparent in a kind of technical sense. And I guess it gets to this point where our intuitive senses of God just completely matches the scientific picture of the universe.
Definitely. And one thing that worries me, though, I mean, I love that Bible verse, but one thing that worries me is I think technology itself and the product of science can help obscure that grandeur of creation from us. And I mean, this is seen most starkly if you live in the city and there's a lot of light pollution and you can't see the stars. That's a huge thing, though, because that in itself, it talks about the stars, talks about the skies, right? That in itself is such an insane level of complexity that people are left, how is such a vast creation in balance? But technology allows us to kind of retreat from the beauty of the world around us into our own kind of constructed worlds. And the metaverse is perhaps the most worrying example of this, but I think this is where science goes wrong, is it just seeks to understand without gaining the perspective in nature. It just seeks progress for progress' sake, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
It's not got an awareness of how can we even progress to begin with.
Yeah, or why progress to begin with.
Why progress? It doesn't question its underlying assumptions. It just carries on regardless.
Is it true that Rich gave us a joke that we should tell?
We often get kind of too serious and deep into our conversations.
Oh, yeah.
So Rich said we should tell a joke to end it.
Yeah.
So, the joke's here.
Okay.
Why did the chicken cross the road?
How do we know there was a chicken? What do you mean?
This is a good point, because I guess we need to determine that there is a chicken before we can explore the possibility of whether it crossed the road, let alone why it crossed the road.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the challenges there is that, like, even the word chicken, you know, constitutes different things in your brain than my brain, and in every human being. I mean, it's not like that word can constitute one exact entity or being.
So it seems there's a real problem with this joke.
Man,
I guess we could talk to Rich to try and see if we can kind of find out the kind of assumptions underlying it, and whether there's any literature we could read.
I mean, how does he know? How does he know there's a chicken? Do we know there's a chicken? You know what I'm saying? 'Cause that's a
I guess
massive
we could
assumption.
assume it.
Okay.
We could just
okay, let's
there's a
assume
big
there's
bullet to bite.
Okay.
Assume.
Guys,
Okay. Yeah.
guys, it's a joke.
What?
It's a joke. It's not. You're not.
Oh, there is no chicken.
It's just read it. It's just a joke. There is no chickens.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay. Let's read it.
Why is that funny though?
And
If there's no
let's-
chickens.
Okay, so why did the chicken
Yeah.
cross the road to get to the other side?
You mean like death? Do you mean like or life? Do you mean?
I don't know if
Do you
it's
mean
a
like-
physical side or an abstract side,
Oh my god.
or what it means when it comes to this. Whether there's a kind of
To get to the other side? Do you know what that means?
I guess when it comes to the kind of physical abstract
This
manifestations
has been
of the beings
TN Proverbs.
within the chicken. or
These
what-
guys do not know what
We
they're
can look
doing
at
right
kind
now.
of philosophical underpinnings.
Thank you for watching.
Oneness and
We hope you'll be here for the second
we can
one.
try and
Okay.
find within
Thank you.
that
Goodbye.
state to delimit ourselves.
I'm done with this.
And we can